A legendary director says Hollywood is drowning in mediocrity. A top star has said that the system is paying actors to make bad movies. And AI actress sparking union controversies. Is the creative film industry in a creative crisis? Well, these are matters arising that will be delving into these stories right here on the Film Mandate. My name is Papa Otu. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to the Film Mandate, where I bring to you movie news, reviews, and reactions, both from the African front and the international scene. And thanks for joining me for this episode of the Film Mandate. I must apologize for starting 5 minutes late due to some updates happening on my systems impromptu. So I apologize sincerely for that. Well, we'll be delving into the stories that have risen, particularly this past week into this very new week. And we have legendary director Ridley Scott, who has claimed that a lot of films made nowadays are not up to par to the films of old and has resorted to watch his own old films to, while away time or to possibly take inspiration or another, stating clearly that Hollywood is drowning in mediocrity. And also, Channing Tatum has, he appeared on the Hot Ones, and in his delivery, in some of the conversations they had, he said emphatically that the system sort of pays actors to make bad movies, particularly from the streaming or the digital, sector. And also, last but not the least, one of the biggest, news item, from last week into this week is the AI actress Tilly Norwood sparking union controversy all over with certain top name actresses, wading into the conversation and expressing their displeasure at what is happening. So these are the major stories for today's episode of the Film Mandate. So delving into the very first one, we have none other than the maestro himself, the legendary director Ridley Scott. And Ridley Scott, for those who are avid fans, it's not possible for you not to have heard the name Ridley Scott when particularly you are a film fan or a passionate film, enthusiast, because he's directed films. One of the most beloved franchises that is sort of having a renaissance in this era is the Aliens, where we've had a number of the franchises being done in this particular era. Aliens and Predator, those particular franchises, and he is one. The creator or the director of the first Aliens movies way back, and Gladiator, starring Russell Crowe. And recently Gladiator 2 was made, which starred Paul Mescal and also had Denzel Washington in the mix as well. So he is a heavyweight when it comes to filmmaking. And for him to have expressed his concern as to the state of some of the films, it is not something you can throw away, because over the years, he's been able to build that credibility and also have the clout. And perhaps, for lack of a better word, he's one of the few, or one of the collective few directors who indeed can, with authority, speak on this issue of mediocrity in films. But let's take a look at exactly what he said and the statement that he expressed, particularly with regards to that. So, the legendary director of Alien, Gladiator, and Blade Runner says films today are so hopelessly mediocre, he's taken to rewatching some of his old movies instead. As reported by UK Yahoo News, the British director was speaking at the BFI South Bank about how he tends to watch plenty of films and TV shows, especially to find new talent to cast in his projects. He spotted the Gladiator 2's Paul Mescal, for example, while watching the BBC miniseries Normal People. Only lately, watching the latest titles has become a bit of a grind for the 87-year-old filmmaker. Well, right now, I'm finding mediocrity. We are drowning in mediocrity, Scott said. The quantity of movies that are made today, literally globally, millions. There's not thousands, there's millions, and most of it is a mess. 80%, 80 to 60%, 40% is the rest, and 25% of that 40 is not bad, and 10% is pretty good, and top 5% is great. Scott acknowledged that his math might not be perfect. I'm not sure about the portion of what I've just said, he added, but in the 1940s, when there were perhaps 300 movies made, 70% of them were similar. For example, I think a lot of films today are saved and made more expensive by digital effects because they haven't got it. What they haven't got is a great script on paper first. Get it on paper. And so this is the statement the legendary director has made with regards to why films today are not living up to the expectations of a film fan like himself, because he's not just a filmmaker, but he's also very passionate about movies as well. And when a director of this nature speaks, you know he's speaking from a standpoint of not just experience, but having been from the golden era. Well, let's see, seen the golden era of Hollywood from from way back till now. So he can tell clearly the difference between back then and what is happening now. And I know perhaps a lot of people in this era may not really share the same view that he has, but I think I do agree with him to an extent where now it looks like a lot of filmmakers or a lot of studios or streaming, or some, I wouldn't say a lot, but some filmmakers resort to always correcting everything in post. And most often than not, it doesn't translate well, particularly when it looks like a lot of scripts are greenlit without a proper, careful analysis as to whether the story there holds carefully or the plot makes sense before putting it on screen. So this has been a challenge, and it can, if there is any measure of how quality some films are, which perhaps what I'm going to say doesn't really, it's not really the best yardstick to pinpoint as to whether a film is good or not, because film, in a way, it's quite subjective, is perhaps the box office. And I'm saying that because recent events have seen that there are some good movies which still doesn't receive the necessary uh, patronage of the masses or the audience. So it's not a good yardstick to use. But what I can say is that it looks like with the advent of streaming services and even some studios not carefully paying attention to what a good movie should entail, it looks like there is just a flooding of the cinemas and the streaming platforms with movies that are subpar compared to what we can tell from the past. And if you check the top perhaps 100 films of all time by either the AFI or um, maybe Box Office Mojo or IMDb, you realize that majority of the films that occupy this spot are films that are made from the past, the golden age of Hollywood. And yes, there are still a number of films that occupy the positions on the 100 list from even some of the modern era and all that, and there will still be some. But then there are a lot of films that are, in a way, quite subpar when you take a look at some of the old films that were made of old and how they were constructed carefully, even with some having little to no effect, so that they are not hiding behind a great spectacle of explosions or effects. That is not to say effects and explosions and others are not needed in films. No, they are needed. But then I can share his sentiments that a lot of these tentpole films, so to speak, and even some smaller films or indie films, but particularly with tentpole films, they hide behind action sequences and then so action set pieces, visual effects, spectacles of explosions, and all that. And he came from an era where the script itself should be very entertaining and engaging enough before even putting it on screen. So that is the genesis of everything. That is not to say he's not had a few hiccups, I mean, of his own in terms of movies, but even with those movies that is had hiccups with, you when you watch it, you can tell what he was aiming for, how ambitious he was, and the fact that all those effects and CGIs and stuff are just complementary factors to the core of the film itself, which is the story. And definitely, I do understand why perhaps he would express such sentiments. And I understand because now, even with the advent of AI now, it looks like it's going to be quite a challenge in this era where a lot of things, perhaps even a lot of scripts now would be generated with AI, and as to whether it will have that human-centered emotion and for and the essence of humanity in there, that is something else to be seen. And even with my third story that I'll be talking about today, which I believe that perhaps most of you have already heard about the AI actress, Tilly Nollywood. A lot of filmmakers may end up using those things. I'm not saying there's not going to come a time where perhaps films using AI will not get better. It may get better, but at the end of it all, it's still going to be a human being who would have to shape the direction as to how the AI stories ought to go in to be quite entertaining for the masses. So it's going to be quite a challenge as to whether this mediocrity of filmmaking that Hollywood is drowning in, and I wouldn't even say just Hollywood, as the world over is drowning in, would there ever be an end to it? Those are questions perhaps we need to ask ourselves, because for all of us, one way or the other, I know we've watched tons of films that we can tell for certain that some didn't really go well, particularly for those who are film aficionados who know some of the technical aspects of film. I'm sure most of you can attest to the fact that some films are really not good, even ones that come from the main Hollywood stream, like the tentpole films, the big blockbusters. Some of them haven't really performed well, not necessarily because of the box office received, but in terms of critically, some are subpar. And I believe that is what he's talking about. And I can understand him having had experiences over, for I think he's been in the industry for more than 5 decades. So he's seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of how some films can be that good and everything. But in as much as I can understand that films can be subjective, but when a film is good, regardless of the story itself, it is good. I know maybe someone may not have a preference or a liking to the story being told, but it won't take away from the fact that when a story is properly constructed, it is good by all the standards that you can measure it with. So I can understand him. And the good thing is that he did acknowledge the fact that in as much as we live in an era where a lot of the system is being flooded with films that are mediocre, there are still some good ones that keep popping up here and there in this particular time we find ourselves in, of which he himself expressed that it is like a relief that there's somebody out there who's doing a good movie. So it is indeed a good thing to hear that some good movies are popping out. Even in recent times, the Savdi, one of the Savdi brothers directing Emily Blunt and Dwayne Johnson in the Mackay movie, The Smashing Machine, is said to be very good and Oscar worthy. And also we have One Battle After Another, which stars Sean Penn, Benicio del Toro, Teyana Taylor, Regina Hall, and Leonardo DiCaprio, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, is said to be also very good, potentially already at the Best Picture win of the Oscars. So, yes, there are some good films still coming out, and we hope that there's going to be a 10 around where a lot of films will be more better than the mediocre ones. And that is what we all hope for, so that the industry can indeed receive the necessary attention that it will be deserving of. So let me know what you think as to the expression of, I mean, the legendary director Ridley Scott saying that a lot of films, the system is drowning in mediocrity as a result of the mediocre films that are being made. So whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in the comment section below. So moving on from a mediocre film to another interesting story, which seems to follow in the same line, is the fact that Channing Tatum, he's been in several movies, but perhaps in recent times, one of the films that he's been noted for, even though he had just a small role, is the Deadpool and Wolverine character Gambit. And on an interview on the Hot Ones, he expressed that a lot of the system itself has, been made such a way that it's incentivized actors to make bad films. And he did express why that is the case, particularly from the streaming service, platforms where scripts are not really up to the standard required, and they are produced because they need an outlet, because they already have an outlet, they need the goods to service the audience that they, one way or the other, have subscribed onto their channel. And this is what he had to say in an article that I think we would like to take a brief look at and see what he said. So in the Variety news article, it says that Channing Tatum says actors are incentivized to make bad things for money or over making something really, really good. It's such an upside down moment. And this is what he said. During a recent appearance on Hot Ones, the Roofman star said that in the current state of the industry, it feels like actors are incentivized to appear in subpar productions for money rather than take a big swing on something really, really good. I think now when you get asked to do a movie or you are trying to get a movie made, it's a very confused pipeline of possibilities. Tatum said, it really feels like at times that you are incentivized to make bad things to get paid rather than make something really, really good for the people that actually get to see these things and for the type of people that I want to see these movies. The person that I was when I was a kid, and I want good movies. And so that is his concern that he has expressed in regards to how some of the films of today are really bad. So in a way, he is actually drumming the same sentiment as the director Ridley Scott has expressed. And truth be told, that is the challenge that a lot of the streaming services are, presenting to the system, because it looks like they have to satisfy the demand that they have created, in their audiences or subscribers. And sometimes as a result, rather than needing the time, giving the filmmakers the time to evolve the stories and be properly made, some are flooded with, deadlines such that they have to meet it to be able to churn out a lot of films to meet the audience that they have to satisfy. And not just them, but even the main studios themselves also, even though they have a business model quite different from what Netflix is, theirs is to put it in the cinemas first and afterwards put it on their streaming platforms. It ends up having the same results as some of the films that are found on Netflix. And that is not to say that Netflix don't have quite some good movies. They do. They do. And likewise, it doesn't mean that the studios with streaming service don't have some bad movies as well. They also do. And that has been a challenge now. So, and it looks like because perhaps their business model is not so heavily dependent on the cinema, system, they really don't feel the pinch of it. Or maybe for one reason or the other, they are already bankrolled by financial institutions who may be looking at a long term, but even for a financial institution looking at a long term goal, will still be much concerned as to why they are not making profits on their movies. Because with whatever financial institution may be, like a film financing company, a lot of them may have shareholders backing the company, especially for the public trading studios. So if a film doesn't perform well on the box office, it becomes a concern. So for those who are perhaps heavily dependent on the streaming model business, because perhaps their financing may be from subscribers, they may not perhaps care much as to whether the film performs well in the studios, in the cinemas or not. But we all know the effect of a long-term business where mediocre products are delivered. In the long term as well, it's going to result in a lot of the subscribers churning. By churning, what they do is that if they realize that the films or television series that are being produced on a particular platform is not good enough, they would, once they are the ones they like are done, they will unsubscribe, and then wait till a time when another production that would really engage them before they come subscribing again. So these are some of the challenges a system that incentivize actors or filmmakers to make bad movies will cause in the long term. And that is something that I wish would not happen. And I like the fact that he highlighted that's the core conflict here is the fact that it creates tension between the artistic integrity and the financial necessity, and this indeed is what causes a lot of challenges. And I can understand that artisans and artists and all that have to live. They have families they have to feed, they have mouths they have to feed. So obviously, if you incentivize them to make a movie, hey, they are work for hire. So I mean, they are hired hands willing to work and make some money. So it may not be that good, but they will get paid, and that is what perhaps at certain times they may be considering. Except for a few other actors who, no matter what, will stick to their guns and rather make sure that whatever script they are working on is the best. So you have a few ones like Leonardo DiCaprio who won't, no matter how good a script is, if it doesn't suit what the vision of his career is or the trajectory that he expects for his career is, he's not going to feature in it. You have same for Denzel, Viola Davis, a number of actresses, I mean, Helen Mirren and stuff, who wouldn't settle for less unless the project is that good. And so it's quite a difficulty now. But the good thing is that obviously there's going to come a time when this will turn around. Even Channing Tatum expressed that it's not going to last for long. There's going to be a time where things will evolve into a different limelight where obviously things will get better than what it used to. And I must even say that producing mediocre movies, can have an impact in from the part of the world I'm from Ghana here. I mean, a lot of people can attest to that. Even for the executive secretary, the deputy executive secretary of the National Film Authority in Ghana, did make a statement in one of the speech he gave that because a lot of producers are producing mediocre films and not producing films that, I mean, he said it in this way, respecting the audience, it has led to a lot of audience losing interest in our own films. And that can also end up being the case as we are even experiencing worldwide now. So you realize that a lot of films in the cinemas, when it's that bad, the same way word of mouth will travel for a good movie It's the same way word of mouth will travel, even sometimes faster and wider than for a bad movie than a good movie. So obviously, it is a challenge, and hopefully, I'm praying that things change where studios or particularly streaming services or digital platform will be much concerned. Even as much as you want to produce, large volumes of content for your subscribers, you should actually look at creating quality content, and that will be a better way to even invite more, people onto your streaming platform. And obviously, producing quality films comes with cost and also time and good expertise. So that would mean getting the best people to helm a project than just trying to meet a deadline and ending up, disappointing your audience who would, in time not go to the cinemas or subscribe. One of the clear example may be to if you are to draw an analysis is how certain and a number of what's it called? A number of the projects or films made by Disney or Marvel, because they didn't live up to the high standard they have set for, and most of their films, it ended up losing some of the interest of people who have been following their projects for long. So it ended up also reflecting in their box office revenues. And I'm sure no studio or even streaming services want that for their business. So hopefully things may change and things may get better than what it used to. So let me know what you think as to Channing Tatum's concern about how the system is incentivizing actors to make bad movies. Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in the comment section below. So moving on from this story to our last, it looks like all the stories today are stories that delves into how not just the Hollywood system, but yes, this is happening mainly in the Hollywood system, but it is a microcosm that reflects onto the whole film industry globally. And you may remember that in 2023, is it 2023? Yes, 2023, there were a number of strikes that happened, particularly in the US, and it had to do with some of the guilds with the main studio about, among several issues. One of the main issue was the issue of AI and how there ought to be some safeguard to make sure that the studios don't take advantage of the workers to, cheapen the cost of production by, using AI so heavily. And this was a concern as well in 2024 when the Brutalist film had portions of the movie using AI to augment the accent of a number of actors in the film. So it looks like the pushback against or the pushback or backlash against AI is not stopping anytime soon, because recently there's been the big news or issue about an AI actress who is looking for an agency to represent her. And this is none other than Tilly Norwood. Tilly Norwood. And that is her in your shot. And it is quite exciting how AI has evolved to a time that now there are actually living embodiments of actors that the living or human actors were fighting that this shouldn't happen. And it's already seeming that we are at that point where there's no turning back. Well, let's take a quick look at a story that highlights the concerns of some of the industry players in this story. So AI-generated actor sparks outrage in Hollywood creator in Hollywood as creator seeks representation. So let me just. So it says that like thousands of actors, Hollywood Tilly Norwood is looking for a Hollywood agent. Her greatest role, pretending to be human. That's because Tilly Norwood is a 100% AI-generated product created by Dutch producer and comedian Elaine van der Velden, founder of a company named Chai, is it Chi Koyai, pardon me if I'm butchering the name, which bills itself as the world's first artificial intelligence talent studio. Velden pitches her AI creation as the next Scarlett Johansson and says there are several agents vying to represent it. CBS News' Jolene Kent reported recently. So this is really a big issue, but I'm looking at a very broader scope of it all. I'm sure most of you have already heard the story, so there isn't even the need to delve into it further. But I'm also looking at it from the angle as to these creations. On this platform, I won't mince words. I've expressed how, in certain sense, for particularly the independent filmmaker who may not have the big budget, even the micro budget to make his or her independent, small independent movie, with the access to some of these AI tools, they can sort of, cut down the cost that they would have otherwise incurred if they incorporate it into the film making process as a whole. That I have said, and I think it has its pros and cons in whichever angle you take a look at. Ordinarily, if you ask me, I would prefer that you work with people who have the skill set and talent to bring a film to fruition from beginning to end. But I can also understand the limitations on filmmakers, even particularly from this part of the world, and not just here alone, but even in the developed, the highly developed film industries, there are still people who do not have the funding to make the films they would have loved to make. So, with the advent of this AI technology, it's going to help people from diverse walks of life, regardless of whether you are in in the Hollywood system or in the US or anywhere else. It's going to help augment certain deficiencies that otherwise you wouldn't have been able to circumvent without this particular inventions. But then it also poses a challenge where, particularly for Africa to be specific, this is indeed a blessing, but also has its major challenge. And I'm speaking from the background of understanding that there was a time when, I think in the early 2010s or in the early 2010s thereabouts, or the late 2000s, the early 2010s, there was a flood of a lot of people trying to put in effects in stories when the effects rendering or the rendition of those effects were so terrible. I mean, I'm not saying we will do, I'm not saying well, if you strive for excellence, you may get something close to almost perfection. But here was a point where a number of these effects were so bad, and they were just left in the movies like that, thinking people would be entertained. And I think a lot of producers fail to understand that, in as much as even a culture where people may not necessarily understand what is going on, they can feel when something is not working. So most of the times you have people assuming that, oh, because a lot of people were laughing in the cinemas or wherever, they are laughing with you. But most often than not, it is because they are laughing at you. And that is where the challenge lies. Even to the extent that there was a time where I think TJ Miller on one of the late night shows in America presented a video of, is it a ghost or a skeleton kicking a baby, and the effects was terrible. I've forgotten which country it's from. I don't think it's from Ghana, but well, it could be from Ghana. But around that era, there was this flurry of films that were flooding, DVD sales, VCD sales, cinemas, and it was terrible. And at a time, it felt like people were buying these movies, but soon enough, the producers themselves realized that it was not working, and they scrapped it altogether. Barely would you see a lot of films nowadays with all those heavily effect scenes in them anymore. And even if they are in the it looks like one way or the other, for the few films that have those effects, they have done their very best to improve upon those CGI, scenes or effects. And that is something I am concerned about when it comes to AI in particular, seeing that it being a new tech, more likely than not, you're going to have a lot of filmmakers who would not particularly take their time to understand how best to use the software or the AI, platforms to augment the film rather than replace the film. And that is my major concern when it comes to the issue of AI's use in certain parts, like Africa, to be specific. So these are some of the challenges we face when these things are not carefully used, but rather ends up replacing what the real job ought to be. So what some of the challenges we are likely to face is job displacement and the valuation of artistry. One of the challenges we have is that, for Hollywood and other places, they are almost or an established industry. But for Africa in particular, our industry is barely hanging on. So we need to actually put the necessary rudimentary building blocks in place first before we sabotage ourselves in the process in trying to find shortcuts. And that is where some of the challenges lie. So that is the primary concern will be AI actors replacing human ones. And I can guarantee you when producers get a hang of it, it's going to be like a wildfire in the Harmattan season. You will see a lot of producers who ordinarily can afford to bring in actors, but would refuse to bring in actors because they think, oh, just having one or two producers, post-production personnel in the studio, they can create a whole film on their own. And it's very likely going to happen. And that's going to be quite a challenge. And the sad part would be using these AI characters to learn from real life actors. And that is where the challenge is going to be. Perhaps the agencies or film commissions in Africa would have to set up and put certain, measures to prevent some of these things from happening. And if it's going to happen, it has to be with the consent of the actors in question. And so these are some of the challenges we are bound to face here in Africa. One of my concerns mostly was the fact that when all these protests was happening in the US, I may be mistaken, but I never saw any place in Africa where the film, the stakeholders of the film industry also, one way or the other, had a dialogue in trying to see what measures can be put in place to make sure that this technology is not abused. I never saw anything of that nature. So that is quite a challenge we are yet to experience. And I hope it doesn't, just as in the era where you had a lot of film producers putting in, chaff, excuse my language. Well, it's not a bad term to use, but putting in quite terrible VFX scenes in their movies. I'm hoping that hasn't become the same when of AI. Yeah, so that is one concern. And also the authenticity deficit, because AI actors may perhaps lack the genuine human experience, and that would reflect because, whether filmmakers may want to take the time to properly infuse even the AI character with the proper research of the culture surrounding the character, that alone is left to be seen. And already there are a number of stories that lacks these already with the human actors. They lack them because you realize that it's just a story being told, but the characters are not properly fleshed out, even with regards to their backstory and all those things. So these are challenges that we are likely to face with all these things, not having proper African storytelling rooted in authentic human experiences and to specifically the culture. And these are challenges we are yet to experience, and I'm hoping it doesn't happen. And one way or the other, AI will not be able to replicate that. And whether the filmmakers themselves would take their time to invest in fleshing out characters, that alone is something else. And also a cultural homogenization where everything seems the same without clear distinction as to which part of the continent they are from. So it is going to be quite bland rather than having authenticity to the characters that are being showcased in the film. So that there's a lot of challenges that this is likely to cause when finally these things end up becoming a mainstay in filmmaking, and that is going to be quite a challenge, I must admit. So these are just a few of some of the challenges we are likely to face when this happens. And I'm hopeful that the necessary stop measures or stop guards will be put in place to prevent this from happening. Or if it happens within the ethics of AI, being quite ethical rather than just a wholesale implementation of all these things rather than, thinking about its impact on the workforce as well. Let me quickly read some of the concerns some main voices in Hollywood has expressed. So um, you have Natasha Lyonne. She starred in Poker Face and Orange is the New Black and Russian Doll, and she said that she expressed that anybody who works with Team Norwood should be boycotted. She went on to say that any talent agency that engages in this should be boycotted by all guilds, said Lyonne, who is currently working with Ethical AI to create a feature film that stars real actors. So she herself is using AI to make a movie, but not taking away the human element and the workforce behind it. So that is quite interesting. She also went on to say, I think Emily Blunt said that this is deeply misguided and totally disturbed when she was shown a video of the creation. It was so terrifying to her, and that's what she said. So these are some of the challenges we are yet to experience, and I pray that that will not be the case. Anyway, this conversation will end today. There's still going to be a lot more coming from days to come. So let me know what you think with regards to how this particular development is likely to impact the African film industries. Do you think we are going to be quite ethical in the use of AI, or is going to be, a free for all thing where people are just using it, hopelessly without considering some of the ethics that could help guide us into using it wisely to rather augment and uplifting the production value of our productions or content. Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in the comment section below. So from the first story of having Ridley Scott talking about Hollywood drowning in mediocrity, which I believe is not just Hollywood but the world over, to Channing Tatum also saying the system is sort of incentivizing the actors to, make bad movies just for the money, and then to AI actors occupying our screens. Will there be a proper solution to it? Well, hopefully it is possible since, the world is quite cyclical, in a way. So hopefully there's going to be a turn of events where things will get better than what we find today. Well, all too soon, I've come to an end of this episode, and thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the Film Mandates. I'll be coming your way again, same time with another live stream at 11:45 p.m. GMT on YouTube. So I'll come your way again tomorrow, and thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.